Stellara Magna Academy had 23 launch pads, 6 orbital libraries, and one aggressively friendly janitorial drone named Chuck. It was widely regarded as the most elite institution in the known galaxy. If you ignored the one orbiting Neptune's moon that required blood oaths and perfect piano pitch for entry. But for those who had endured its grueling trials, passed its biometric exams, and navigated the social minefield of sharing a dorm with a species that reproduced via osmosis, Stellara Magna was home. Class C9A resided in the East Spire, a glimmering shard of translucent alloy balanced on gravitational stabilizers so delicate that one student sneezing too hard could disrupt a physics lecture. It was a special class reserved for the best, the smartest, the deadliest, and the most politically useful daughters of the Galactic Accord's outer systems. And they were all daughters, all alien, all advanced. Varela of Elith sat in the back corner, naturally elevated by an unconscious posture that suggested she could kill you with her pinky toe. Her long ears twitched as she observed her classmates with cool disinterest. She had already memorized the day's lesson content and created 3 counter-arguments for the holographic ethics debate that hadn't even started yet. Her mind was calm, ordered, lethal, until the door hissed open. It wasn't the ceremonial kind of door opening, like when an archon floats in surrounded by incense and hidden weapons. This one squealed slightly, then stuck halfway before forcing itself open with a pneumatic wheeze and a metallic thunk. And then, through the ill-maintained frame, came chaos. A boy. Human. He had the posture of someone not quite used to space boots, a backpack slung over one shoulder like he wasn't carrying 3 kilos of gravity-neutral textbooks, and a haircut that screamed, "My mom did this with kitchen scissors." He looked around the room, blinking at the spectrum of alien faces staring back at him, some with 2 eyes, some with 8, one with a rotating set of ocular lenses, and smiled like a man unaware he was about to be emotionally dissected. "Hey," he said, "is this algebra?" The room paused, as if existence itself had frozen in protest. The floating orb of the instructor's assistant made a confused bloop sound. The Carroll twins gasped in perfect synchrony. Ziva, the semi-holographic girl from the Cygnian Nebula, shimmered into partial transparency out of sheer stress, and Varela narrowed her eyes. "No," she said, voice sharp enough to pierce armor. "This is applied galactic ethics and interspecies diplomacy." The boy looked down at his schedule, flipped it over, squinted, then looked back up. "Oh, cool. That's even better. I failed ethics back on Earth. But I passed cooking, so that's something, right?" A chair scooted back as the plant-based girl, Lasali, whispered, "He eats things." "He failed ethics?" whispered another. "Why is he here?" The instructor, a floating synthroid with an emotion simulation subroutine stuck on confused parental figure, hovered toward the newcomer. "Student ID?" The boy fumbled with his tablet, which promptly slipped from his hands and skidded across the floor, colliding gently with a desk leg. "Sorry, gravity here's weird. Earth legs, you know?" "You're walking just fine," muttered Varela. He grinned at her. "That's because I practiced. Watched like 4 whole videos on how not to fall in space." Someone snorted. The class flinched. It was Ilana, who hadn't laughed since her species entered a peace treaty with the Vlorn Empire by surrendering their entire moon collection. She clapped a hand over her mouth. The synthroid picked up the tablet, scanned it, and beeped in mild dismay. "Confirmed. Theo Granger, Earthborn, transferred via exchange program. Late arrival due to atmospheric delays." The instructor paused. "And bureaucratic confusion involving customs declarations for donuts," Theo supplied helpfully. "I brought 2 dozen for orientation week. Still in cryo if anyone wants one." More silence. More blinking. The Vlorn girl hissed through her 3-part mandible. Varela adjusted her gauntlet and decided to document this moment later in her personal report titled, "The End of Galactic Sanity." Theo ambled to the only empty seat, right in the center of the class, still blissfully unaware that several classmates had been trained to subdue hostiles with nothing more than their thoughts. He gave a thumbs up to the instructor. "I'm ready to learn ethics and diplomacy and stuff." Very well, said the synthroid. Please turn your attention to the ethics simulation sphere. A glowing orb descended from the ceiling, casting a soft blue light. Within seconds, a scenario emerged. Two species fighting over a habitable moon, each claiming religious and historical rights. Arguments, tensions, historical trauma. The class leaned forward, minds sharpened. Theo raised his hand. Yes, Earth student? The synthroid asked. He leaned in, earnest. Have we tried just splitting it in half? Like a timeshare? A pause, someone coughed. Then Varella's hand shot up. That violates 8 territorial stability accords, 23 cultural mandates, and results in an orbiting nightmare. Theo nodded, undeterred. Okay. Then what if one species lives underground and the other builds, like, moon condos on top? Someone giggled. This time it was Lasali. Her leaves shivered with amusement. Virella sighed through her teeth. You're not taking this seriously. I am. I'm just thinking outside the space box. You are the space box, she snapped. He blinked. I don't know what that means, but it felt insulting. It was. Everyone knew it was. But it was also kind of funny. The simulation paused. The instructor hovered. While unconventional, the Earth students' solutions demonstrate a level of creative thinking. Let us proceed. As the lesson continued, the air shifted. Not completely, not warmly, but something was beginning. Something absurd, unlikely, and possibly dangerous to the long-established social hierarchy of the class. By the end of the session, Theo had been corrected 19 times, mispronounced 4 alien names, one of them very offensively, and accidentally offered a marriage gesture to the Vlorn girl, who accepted with diplomatic courtesy before being told it was a mistake. But he survived. And that in Class C9A was already a cosmic anomaly. There was something inherently suspicious about Theo Granger. Not that he was hiding secrets or coded messages or a plasma blade in his boot, though Varela had discreetly scanned him for all 3 within the first 24 hours. No, the suspicion came from the way he navigated the academy like it was a casual stroll through a shopping center rather than a hyper-competitive, species-diverse pressure cooker that routinely trained the future elite of 27 civilizations. Take, for example, breakfast. Stellara Magna's dining hall was an architectural masterpiece, a hexagonal prism of glass and antimatter shielding, orbiting serenely above the Academy's main tower. Each table adjusted automatically to the body shapes, limb counts, and gravity preferences of its occupants. The food synthesizers responded to genetic ID and cultural dietary codes. One could order grom leaf stew with live sparks, or water that sang lullabies as it was poured. Theo ordered toast, dry, no butter, then proceeded to eat it with a spork. Varela watched him from 2 tables away, quietly furious. He had sat with Lasali, the plant girl in Sreech, the spherical sentience from Fulgax 9, and they were all laughing. She didn't even know Sreech had a laugh protocol. Theo had just made some joke about Earth raccoons that sent Sreech into a full spin, pulsing purple and bouncing like a weather balloon on too much helium. She had heard it. They're like furry little burglars, but with less ambition. It wasn't even funny. Back in class, things didn't improve. During astropolitics, when asked to analyze the historic Treaty of Eltarian, a famously delicate truce negotiated during a week-long psionic silence, Theo raised his hand and asked, "So, they settled it by just not talking? That's actually genius. Most of my family reunions would have benefited from that." When the instructor paused, possibly reevaluating the need for biological instruction, Theo continued, "No offense, but that makes more sense than half the human treaties. We usually just wait until someone gets tired or hungry." Ziva, who existed as 90% energy and 10% sarcasm, flickered into visible form and muttered, "Humans are powered by chaos." To which Theo cheerfully replied, "And caffeine. Don't forget caffeine." It wasn't that he was disrespectful. He did the assignments, asked questions, tried enthusiastically, if incompetently, to understand hyperstring calculus and macrocultural ethics. He was just different, which Varela supposed was the point. She finally cornered him in the weapons hall, where students practiced with training spears that could simulate over 300 blade types without actual dismemberment. Theo had wandered in holding one by the wrong end. "Do you even know what that's for?" she asked, voice as cold as a comet's core. He blinked, then squinted at the spear. Uh, Advanced pointing? It's a Sang blade emulator. It can replicate a Martari dual-edged staff, an Elythan crescent scythe, or a Zerkit plasma hook. That last one sounds illegal. "It is," she said, stepping closer. "We use it to train in forms passed down for generations. It requires precision, control, and focus. You lack all three." Theo grinned. "But I've got enthusiasm. That's gotta count for something." "It doesn't." "Optimism?" "Negative." "Abs?" she faltered. "Irrelevant." He twirled the spear, badly, and accidentally triggered the Elythan crescent mode, which spun into an arc and narrowly missed his own kneecap. "Whoa. Okay, that's sharp. Do these things come with a safe mode?" Virella snatched it from him with a movement so fast it blurred. "You are not authorized to handle combat tools without instruction." He raised his hands in surrender. "Fair. I did once break my arm on a pogo stick." Her ears twitched. "What is a pogo stick?" "A human device designed to test the limits of dignity." She stared at him, weighing the possibility that this was another one of his jokes. Probably. Possibly. Infuriatingly. To her surprise, he didn't leave. He just stood there, watching the others train. Students practicing parries, leaps, defensive stances. He didn't even look embarrassed, just curious. "You really want to learn?" she asked before she could stop herself. He turned. "You offering?" She sighed. "I'm threatening." He smiled again, lopsided. "Close enough." And so it began. Not a mentorship, not a friendship, something else. She showed him how to hold the spear, his fingers were too stiff, and how to move his feet, he tripped twice, and how to focus his energy, he accidentally activated the Zerkit hook and nearly took down the scoreboard. He never complained, never quit. He just got up, grinned, and said things like, "Well, at least this time I didn't injure anyone except myself." And somehow that amused her. A little. Later that day, she found herself studying his record. Earthborn, raised in something called New Cleveland. No criminal offenses unless you counted repeated toaster arson. Poor math scores, excellent improvisation scores. Quarantined once for bringing a frog to school. She closed the file and stared at the ceiling of her dorm pod, where the light shimmered in rhythmic pulses to simulate calm. It didn't help, because she didn't understand him. He was clumsy, unpredictable, underqualified, and deeply unprofessional. And she was starting to like him. Not in the, "I wish to couple with this creature" way. Not yet, maybe not ever. That was absurd. Her people didn't even date. They made calculated alliances after a series of combative rituals. But there was something about the way he spoke, the way he laughed even when everyone stared, the way he asked the wrong questions and somehow made the answers matter. She'd have to watch him closely, for the sake of the class, obviously. And for the first time in a long while, she looked forward to the next ethics simulation. Because, if nothing else, it was only a matter of time before Theo Granger tried to out-debate a telepathic jellyfish. And she had to see how that played out. The intergalactic cohesion trials were announced with all the subtlety of a solar flare. One moment, the class was engaged in a rather tense mock negotiation over asteroid water rights. Theo had just proposed installing universal vending machines, and the next, the wall lit up with rotating glyphs and a siren that sounded suspiciously like a goat being electrocuted. Half the students ducked. One defensive mist being vaporized her desk out of reflex. Theo, unfazed, raised his hand and asked, "Is that the school bell? Or did someone just summon an eldritch horror?" Virella didn't flinch. Her instincts told her this was no ordinary alarm. That was confirmed seconds later by the instructor Synthroid, who descended with a dramatic puff of ionized gas. "Attention, Class C9A, it said, rotating slightly for emphasis. "The time has come for your participation in the intergalactic cohesion trials." Groans. Groans in 7 languages. These trials weren't exams in the traditional sense. They were ancient, revered, and deeply annoying. Designed to force future diplomats and officers to work together across species barriers, they involve being thrown into unpredictable, usually uncomfortable environments with exactly one partner, and no way to escape short of a medical emergency or spontaneous combustion. Theo leaned towards Shreech. So it's like a camping trip, but with more psychological trauma? Shreech pulsed orange. And fewer marshmallows. Pairs will be selected by algorithm, the synthroid continued, with consideration given to intellectual, emotional, and physiological compatibility metrics. Virella narrowed her eyes. She knew what that meant. It meant the algorithm was going to do something stupid. It did. Theo Granger and Virella of Elith? A silence so profound it almost bent time. Theo blinked. Huh. Is this one of those team-building things where I learn the value of friendship and she learns how not to murder me? Virella stood up. I volunteer for reassignment. Denied, said the synthroid cheerfully. Your match compatibility registered at 87.3%. On what scale? She demanded. The narrative probability algorithm. Theo gave her a thumbs up. At least we've got chemistry. We do not have chemistry, she muttered. Chemistry is just atoms pretending to like each other, he offered. We've got that. They were briefed and transported within hours. Their simulation zone was Moongrid Delta, an artificial satellite designed to resemble a wilderness planet in perpetual dusk, complete with unpredictable weather systems, carnivorous flora, and an unsettling abundance of insects with too many knees. Their mission, survive, locate 3 beacon modules, and demonstrate collaborative problem-solving over 72 hours. Theo emerged from the drop pod, humming the theme from an old Earth sitcom. Okay, so this is nice. Trees, fresh air, no bathrooms. Virella hit the ground, already scanning the horizon. Stay close. Do not touch anything. Do not eat anything. Do not name anything. Theo looked crestfallen. Not even that lizard thing with the monocle face? It's not wearing a monocle. That's a thermal gland. And it spits acid. The wilderness was deceptive, beautiful in a holographically enhanced way, with glowing ferns and floating pollen that danced in lazy spirals, but every element had been designed to push discomfort to the edge of hostility. The first hour saw them navigating a terrain of shifting sand pockets that swallowed Theo up to the waist. He insisted on calling it a spay treatment for the legs, while Virella nearly lost her balance, rescuing him with a magnetic grapple. You're surprisingly heavy for a species with such thin ankles, she grunted. Earthbone density comes with a free tendency to fall off cliffs. By nightfall, they had found a cave, a source of not poisonous water, and one of the beacons, lodged inside the remains of a robotic snake that had apparently lost a territorial dispute with a bigger robotic snake. Theo poked it with a stick. So, do we sleep here or die here? I require only 20 minutes of meditative stasis, Virella replied. You may die if you wish. He leaned against a rock, using his pack as a pillow. Cool. I'm going to snore loudly and ask philosophical questions in my sleep. You're doing it wrong. Even your resting is inefficient. And yet I thrive. The second day brought more hazards and more awkward teamwork. Virella moved like she was born for it. Silent, precise, every sense calibrated. Theo moved like a documentary narrator who'd wandered onto the set. He complained about rocks, told stories about how Earth once tried to colonize Mars using inflatable buildings, and at one point stopped to sketch a particularly majestic three-eyed bird in the dirt. That's not part of the mission, she snapped. It's called art, he replied. It nourishes the soul. That bird is venomous. Then it's edgy art. Still, they found the second beacon, then the third. And with each challenge, the storm of memory-altering spores, the cave collapse, the brief incident where Theo thought he'd discovered a new mineral and actually picked up a sentient rock with strong opinions, they began to adjust. Not seamlessly, not effortlessly, but when Virella slipped down a slope and dislocated her shoulder, it was Theo who used a makeshift sling, braced her against a boulder, and kept her talking so she wouldn't pass out. He asked ridiculous questions. Favorite color, worst haircut, whether space chickens existed. But his hands were steady, his voice calm. Humans don't break easily, he said when she raised an eyebrow. We just complain loudly while surviving. By the time the extraction pod arrived, They were both exhausted, scratched, and soaked in sap of uncertain origin. Varella's expression was unreadable. Theo looked like a man who had won a mildly threatening lottery. In the debriefing room, the instructors looked over their footage, analyzing decision-making, cooperation, emotional growth. One of them murmured, "Fascinating." Another whispered, "Unexpected." Theo leaned toward Varela. "So, I think we nailed it." "You still have no idea what you're doing." "I'm doing it with style, though." She stared at him, then for the first time smiled without immediately punishing herself for it. It wasn't much, but in intergalactic terms, it was seismic. The cafeteria ceiling was simulating a pleasant Earth sunrise, complete with filtered light beams, gentle avian audio loops, and one confused mechanical squirrel that occasionally ran in circles near the juice dispensers. Varela sat at her usual table, posture rigid, eyes scanning a tablet filled with tactical reports. Yet her thoughts were stubbornly elsewhere. Across the room, Theo was attempting to eat a bowl of Grithorian energy flakes with chopsticks. He was doing it badly. "That's not how it's done," muttered Ilana, whose homeworld had long since declared chopsticks a cultural offense. "I'm creating a new technique," Theo replied, poking at the flakes until one stuck to the side of his chopstick and promptly fell into his lap. "I call it gravity denial. Very advanced." It had been a week since the Moon Grid Delta trial, a week since Varela had watched him bandage her arm with strips torn from his undershirt and seen the worry behind his jokes. A week since she realized she didn't entirely mind his presence, which was the problem. Elithan warriors were not supposed to not mind things. They were supposed to assess, categorize, and either eliminate or avoid. But Theo didn't fit any category. He was a chaos variable wrapped in a smile and powered by sugar. And now rumors were spreading, first among the students, then the instructors, then, somehow, the diplomatic council attached to the academy, which meant someone had filed a report. Varela suspected the synthroid ethics teacher, whose voice module had started glitching every time Theo entered the room. "They say you've corrupted her," said Shreech that morning, bobbing gently beside Theo during zero-gravity recitation. "I'm flattered," said Theo, flipping through a cultural protocol manual. "I usually need at least a second date before that happens." "You shared water," Shreech pointed out. "That's intimacy in 14 species." "She was bleeding," Theo said. "It wasn't romantic hydration, it was first aid." "Still counts in Vlorn culture," Shreech replied. When Varela arrived at Advanced Tactics, the classroom was abuzz. Her ears twitched as she passed groups whispering, not so quietly in Standard Galactic. Someone had scrawled Varela plus Theo equals diplomatic incident on the smartboard before the teacher had purged it. She sat at her station, kept her face neutral, and tried not to imagine what her mother, Fleet Commander Cyrus of the Elithan Armada, would say if she knew her daughter's reputation was being altered by a human who once used a food tray as a sled. As if summoned by thought, Theo plopped into the seat beside her. "Hey," he said casually, "did you see the latest interspecies gossip rankings? We're trending." "I am not trending," she said flatly. "Don't worry, I told them the rumors were exaggerated. I'm not charming enough to corrupt a royal-class combat genius." "That's true. But I am pretty decent at first impressions. I mean, I only nearly died twice in front of you." "3 times," she corrected. "You forget the sparring drone incident." "Right, the drone that didn't appreciate sarcasm. That was a fun Tuesday." The assignment for the day was group strategy analysis. Each pair had to review a failed historical battle and argue how diplomacy might have saved it. The pairings were randomized. Somehow again, Varela and Theo ended up together. "Did the algorithm bond us?" Theo asked. "Are we in a legally binding codependent academic relationship?" She ignored him and brought up the simulation interface. The failed battle was the Siege of Vortax, a brutal 3-day skirmish where communication broke down over a punctuation error in the peace offering. Theo squinted. "They misread a comma and thought they were being insulted?" "It was a culturally sacred comma," Varela said. "I feel like Earth has done worse. We once went to war over a pig, or maybe it was a sandwich." As they analyzed troop movements and political triggers, Theo began proposing alternate scenarios. What if, instead of a formal envoy, they sent someone like me? "They'd have surrendered," Varela muttered. See, that's strategy. I'm too confusing to shoot. He said it jokingly, but she looked at him sideways. He was confusing and unpredictable and weirdly effective in ways no training simulation could replicate. He also brought her snacks during breaks now. I didn't know what you eat, he said once, offering a packet of dried earth fruit. So I just picked the thing that looked least like a bribe. She took it, said nothing, then kept the wrapper. She didn't know why, but not everyone was amused. That afternoon, Varela received a formal summons from the Council of Cross-Cultural Stability. Theo naturally heard about it first from a janitorial drone with a penchant for gossip. You're in trouble, he told her on the way to language theory. Big space trouble. Why? Because the galaxy doesn't like when people color outside the lines, especially if they color with sarcasm and bad table manners. When she entered the council chamber, decorated in painfully neutral tones and seating arrangements calibrated for maximum discomfort, she was met by 3 officials and a floating representative from the Academy Ethics Board. They asked about her relationship with the human. She told them the truth. He is inefficient, distractible, and dangerous in ways he does not understand. They nodded. But, she added, he also listens. He adapts. He survived a trial that broke trained ambassadors. He makes people laugh when they want to fight. And he's the only person here who treats me like I'm just a person. A pause. And I don't want to be reassigned. Later that night, Theo found her in the atmospheric gardens. The starlight was dimmed to simulate a gas giant eclipse. He held a bag of earth chips. You didn't get expelled, he said, sitting beside her. No, she said. You didn't deny knowing me either. She took a chip, chewed. It wouldn't have helped. They sat in silence for a while. A comet passed in the distance. One of the robotic bees landed on Theo's shoe and began attempting pollination. He let it. You know, he said finally, this place is exhausting. She turned to him. And you're not? I'm a break from exhausting. She let herself smile, just once, and didn't punish herself for it. The announcement came through the Academy's all-channel feed just after first meal. Stellara Magna Grand Unity Assembly. Attendance required. Formal attire encouraged. Emotional stability preferred. Theo stared at the message while brushing synthetic crumbs off his lap. Emotional stability preferred? That's deeply unfair. I barely manage physical stability on stairs. Virella stood across from him in the garden dome, arms crossed, long ears tilted forward in mourning. This is a political summit, not a field trip. Right, he said, eyes narrowing. So I should not bring my harmonica? She didn't answer, which he took as a gentle maybe. In the days following the council meeting, the entire academy had begun watching them like they were part of a slow-moving galactic experiment. Equal parts scandal, curiosity, and disaster potential. The rumor boards were flooded. The ethics instructors began adding disclaimers to all interspecies contact modules. One cafeteria hologram now required users to confirm that their meal choices did not indicate romantic intent. Still, the rumors hadn't broken them apart. They hadn't spoken about whatever their relationship was, and neither of them particularly knew how to. But Virella had begun saving him a seat in class, and Theo had stopped tripping over his own boots quite as often when she was nearby. Progress in its own way. The assembly was held in the central spire, a glass-floored auditorium orbiting just above the Academy's upper atmosphere, where the planet's storms could be seen swirling below in mesmerizing, deadly spirals. Delegates from across the galaxy filled the tiered seating, their features ranging from scaled to crystalline to lightly humming. Theo adjusted his formal uniform for the 6th time. I don't know if this thing is supposed to itch or if that's just a standard human response to pressure. You look fine, Virella said, and then immediately added, acceptably. He smiled, nervous and crooked. You know, I wasn't expecting to be part of a grand social reformation when I signed up. I thought maybe I'd pass some classes, make a few friends, not die. She tilted her head. You've only almost died 4 times. Which means I'm ahead of the average Earth student, to be fair. The assembly began with the usual fanfare, drifting banners in binary, ceremonial plasma torches, and a long-winded speech from the Galactic Accord Chair being, whose vocal register fluctuated between distant foghorn and dizzy mosquito. Then came the student presentations. Varela was called first. She rose, walked to the center stage, and faced 1,000 eyes. Her voice, when it came, was calm and clear. I was taught to calculate, to assess strength, tradition, and loyalty. But I was never taught to account for unpredictability, or laughter, or the fact that sometimes the most unprepared person can walk into a room and rearrange everything. She glanced sideways, not subtly. Theo waved, less subtly. Theo Granger is human. He is not a warrior. He has no legacy. He asked foolish questions, and yet he challenged every assumption I was raised to hold. Without weapons, without strategy, just by being, she paused, himself. There was a silence, thick with tension and blinking translator lights. Then the council asked the expected question, "Do you believe this relationship threatens the Academy's stability?" Theo stepped forward before she could answer. "I think it threatens the predictability of the Academy, which is different. Predictability's overrated." A ripple of murmurs. One delegate dropped their diplomatic snack. "I'm not trying to change the galaxy," Theo continued. "I'm just trying to not screw up the part I'm standing in. I didn't come here to start anything, but I'm not sorry if I did." More silence, then impossibly applause. First from the students, then from a few of the younger instructors, and finally from the representative of the aquatic delegation, who made a ceremonial bubble as big as a basketball, which was considered a standing ovation on their planet. Afterward, in the observation corridor overlooking the orbiting gardens, Varela stood beside Theo with a look that almost passed for relaxed. "You didn't answer the question," he said, leaning on the rail. "I didn't need to," she replied. "You did." They watched a storm roil far below the station, blue lightning dancing across silver clouds. "I'll probably flunk advanced diplomacy," he said after a moment. "Undoubtedly. But you'll visit me in Earth prison, right?" "Only if they allow outside snacks." He turned toward her, more serious now. "This wasn't supposed to happen. Me here, you, and me." She studied him, quiet. "Do you regret it?" he asked. "No," she said, "but I do regret not meeting you sooner." He blinked, a little stunned. Then, because neither of them was good at endings, he said, "So if I ever show up to one of your family gatherings, will I need a translator or just body armor?" "Both." They laughed, and the sound echoed up into the gravity ducts. Back in class, things changed. Slowly, subtly. Students from species that once avoided contact began forming study groups. Lasali joined Theo for Earth Literature Club, despite being unable to read anything that didn't photosynthesize. Varela taught Theo how to properly wield a stun blade, not because he needed it, but because she liked the way he said, "ow," every time it buzzed. At the end of term, Theo passed his classes, barely. But that wasn't the victory. The victory was that he had arrived as a novelty and stayed as a person. The victory was that Varela, trained in every form of resistance, had learned to yield, just a little. And somewhere in the Academy records, quietly updated by an administrator with a fondness for symmetry, their match compatibility was revised from 87.3% to 100.